Good morning, everyone. All right, this marks the official start of the webinar. Welcome to this sixth webinar in the series of 6 on the European Green Deal and the European Textile Strategy. Today, we'll be talking about the directive to empower consumers for the green transition, as well as the Green Claims Directive. My name is Magali Minet. I'm your host for today, and so I'm very much looking forward to what's coming up. All right, we'll be talking about the European Textile Strategy and both directives. I'm also just going to have a look at the screen. I think someone has started sharing their screens. I'm not sure what's going on, but my colleague Hani in the background will be able to deal with that, I think. In the meantime, I'll be continuing. So we're talking against the framework of the European Textile Strategy and European Green Deal. That will actually be impacting the textile sector heavily. Not only from that legislative process, but also from, what do you have to do? What actions are there for you to be taken, and how can you as a company best prepare? And that's exactly what we'll be diving into for these two directives as well. If I say we, then I'm talking about a joint organization of this webinar by the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles and the Green Button. The Partnership for Sustainable Textiles is a multi-stakeholder initiative where different stakeholders from the sector come together to really work towards that sustainable transition. And the Green Button, on the other hand, is a government-run certification label. Voila. As I said already, but also for the people who recently joined, we're talking today about empowering consumers for a green transition directive and the Green Claims Directive. This session will be recorded, and also all presentations will be shared with you. So no worries there. You'll be able to review the session as well. However, if you have any questions for our experts, make sure to stay on and use the chat button that you see. There is an icon of a chat box somewhere down below your screen. And should you, during the presentations, have a question for our experts, make sure to indicate their name in front of your question and then add your question. I have two colleagues of mine in the background, being Sandra and Kathleen, who are monitoring the chat constantly, to grab your questions and also take them along to the Q&A at the end of the session. So should you feel like, okay, I have a question for an expert, make sure to indicate that in the chat. They're there to monitor the chat as well, but we'll be taking your questions along to the Q&A at the end of the session as well. All right, talking about questions, I firstly have a question for you as well. For us to know a bit what you are looking at, we have a small poll prepared, and if all goes well, Hani, my colleague in the background, will pull that poll up right now. And so we have a question for you, being, what is your expectation for today? What is it that you wish to take with you from this session? Are you just here to listen in, to get a bit of a grab of what the directions are about? Are you looking for concrete answers to questions you already have? Or are you looking for actions that you can take home with and start preparing on? So I see the poll is normally at the right side of your screen, and I see that most people are here to get an understanding of what's going on, get an introduction to the directives, but there is also people who hope to take home tangible actions. And that's exactly also what we try to aim for in this session. So, all right, thank you so much for your answers there. Don't forget to also put your questions in the chat, and for the people who recently joined, the recording will be shared with you. All right, without much further ado, it is my honor to introduce you to our first expert. And that will be Mirjam Tiemann from European Environmental Bureau, also known as EEB. Miriam is a policy officer for sustainable consumption at EEB, and she focuses on circular economy. A focus specifically on eco-labels, green claims, and fighting greenwashing. Miriam will shed her light on the scope of the regulation, what the requirements are, where we are today in the legislative process, how enforcement will look like, but maybe also, most importantly, what the impacts will be of these regulations on the textile sector. Miriam, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I'm Miriam Thiemann, and like you heard now, I work at the EV, and I'm very happy to be here today to talk you through an introduction of these two directives that are the topic of today, the Green Claims Directive and the Empowering Consumers Directive. Before I jump into the topic, let's say, I wanted to give you an idea who the EEB is. So we are the European Environmental Bureau. We're Europe's largest network of environmental NGOs across Europe. So we are really the umbrella for over 180 members who are NGOs from over 40 countries. And yeah, trying to connect the environmental movement at EU level to what's happening at national level. So together we advocate for better, greener policies in the EU. And we are structured in many work areas. I am part of the circular economy team, where we look, among other things, at green communication, green claims, and eco-labels, but also greenwashing. And yeah, you see, we also have a lot of other topics that we're working on. But getting straight into it. First, what is the problem? I don't think I have to convince you that greenwashing is very prevalent, but I just wanted to show you what was the reasoning of the European Commission to come out with these two directives, because they did an impact assessment to find out what is the problem with greenwashing and what do we need to do. So through the assessment of many green claims that the Commission did, they found out that, first of all, almost all products already have a green claim in one way or the other, pretending or marketing to be green. But then looking further, what's behind these claims, the Commission found they're in many cases just very vague, which can also be misleading. And also in 40% of cases, there was no evidence given that how this claim can be justified. And here on the left side, you see also a pie chart of a market sweep that was done. So an assessment of many green claims on online websites and traders' online shops. And where the most misleading green claims were found was really in the textile sector, in the cosmetic sector, but on many other products as well. And the same is true not only for green claims, but also for eco-labels. First of all, there are really a lot of eco-labels in the EU. 230 were counted at the time, and that is really for products. This does not include, for example, all the green energy labels. And when the Commission closer looked at those eco-labels, they found that half of them cannot demonstrate that there's reliable verification of what these labels stand for. So that is the problem that the EU noted, and why these directives are on their way now. So we have these two directives with which the Commission wants, first of all, to really help consumers to be more informed when they decide what they want to buy, and that they have credible green information at hand. But the idea is also that this will support companies, because it is also unfair for companies who are actually doing an honest effort to improve their products to then maybe lose off to other companies who are greenwashing, but it's not detected and they're still getting the benefits of it. So in that sense, also creating a more level playing field. And generally, this comes in the context of accelerating the green transition. So here we have these, with these objectives in mind, the two directives, Empowering Consumers and the Green Claims Directive. Now, I often find that people are a bit confused why there are two directives that seem to be very similar in their objective and where the difference is. So here in a nutshell, the Empowering Consumers Directive comes with consumers in mind, and with the idea what are the most misleading practices in the area of greenwashing that need to be banned because they can never be true or they are always misleading. So it comes from a consumer standpoint, telling companies what they should not do. And then the Green Claims Directive comes on top of that. It's a more technical file to tell companies, okay, but how can you do to communicate green claims that are not misleading, but still how do you prove that this is actually true, what you're claiming? So they are two very complementing directives. The difference is also that at the moment, the Empowering Consumers Directive has just been through the whole negotiation process here in Brussels. So this is an adopted legislation now. For the Green Claims Directive, the negotiations are fully ongoing. So there's still some uncertainty what will actually apply in the end. And I'll also point this out a few times throughout the presentation. Now, to give you a few ideas what the Empowering Consumers Initiative that is now adopted has newly introduced, it added a few unfair practices that are banned in all cases. And I say adding because actually it amends an existing piece of legislation. The EU already has the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. And now with all this background in mind, they decided to add a few more unfair practices in the remit of greenwashing. So blacklisted will be, for example, to make a very general green claim if you cannot specify further what is meant. So for example, just saying green or just saying eco, which would be very general. Unless the product can really, or the producer can really demonstrate why the entire product is green and better than conventional products. So to say, demonstrating environmental excellence, which could be done, for example, with a holistic eco-label like the EU eco-label and other officially recognized labels. Another blacklisted practice, I call it the anti-cherry picking practice, says you shouldn't make a claim that sounds as if you're promoting the entire product as green if actually you've only improved one aspect of the product and also of services. So to be specific and not generalize from one aspect to the other or to the entire product. And then also, very interestingly, there is now a ban of carbon neutral claims on products. This was not easy to get through, let's say. But here the idea is on a product level, traders should not claim that the product has no impact on the climate, that it's climate neutral, climate friendly, because this is not possible and also very poorly understood by consumers, actually. Now, what did the Empowering Consumers Initiative bring for sustainability labels? One important part is that there's a ban of displaying a label which is not based on a certification scheme. So you could turn it around and say any label needs to show there is a certification scheme behind it. Exempt from that are those labels that are run by public authorities. Now, what does certification scheme mean? This is really a nice addition in our view to define what does a label need to be backed up with. And the certification scheme has now been defined to fulfill certain transparency and credibility conditions. For example, that there is third-party verification. For example, that the criteria of the label are publicly available. And that in the development of these criteria, relevant experts and stakeholders are consulted. And for example, there's also rules that there need to be procedures behind the label, how to deal with non-compliance and if there are complaints. So this should really improve the governance of all sustainability labels. Now, this in a nutshell for the Empowering Consumers Initiative. Now I'm going to the complementary file, the Green Claims Directive, which is also more technical in what it demands from green claims and green labels. So I'll spend a bit more time here. First of all, what's the scope of the Green Claims Directive? It is about business to consumer, voluntary green claims and green labels. So in B2B communications are excluded. What's also excluded is certain environmental claims and labels that are already regulated more specifically in other EU legislation. So for example, the EU Ecolabel, which is the EU's official sustainability label, is exempted from the Green Claims Directive. Same goes for organic claims regulated under the organic regulation, and there are a lot more examples. In terms of company sizes who are affected, micro enterprises are excluded. Micro enterprises, I think, is anything under 10 staff or under 10 million annual turnover. And SMEs are included, but there are some measures foreseen to support them in being able to comply with what the Green Claims Directive will ask from them. So that's the scope. Now, what's actually in the directive? I highlighted here a few of the main elements that are important to know about. So one important factor is that any green claim and any label will have to be substantiated. So the company will have to provide evidence why what they're claiming is true, basically. Then there are also rules on how to communicate once you've substantiated what your claim is about, some more specific rules for environmental labeling schemes. And then all of this is complemented with how can we verify that all of this is followed. And this goes along with then also market surveillance, complaint handling, and penalties. But I'll go mostly now into the substantiation and verification requirements. So substantiation means the company has to provide documentation to prove the claim or the label. There was, before this proposal came out, a big debate whether the EU should prescribe one methodology that anybody should use when making a green claim. And very briefly before the proposal, this did not happen. And instead, we have an article now that sets general principles for substantiation and what methodologies that are used for substantiation should comply with, without saying specifically what these methodologies are. I know you'll hear in the next few presentations a bit more about the details of this. So just to quickly run through a few points what substantiation includes. It has to be specified what the claim or the label is about. Is it about the entire product or just a part of it? To substantiate it, scientific evidence has to be used. And also the claim must be demonstrated that the claim addresses a significant environmental issue from a life cycle perspective, so that it's not just claiming, I don't know, we've increased 2% the recycled content or so, and then make a claim about it if actually this is not so relevant for the impact of the entire product. There are a few more things like demonstrating that what you're claiming is not anyways already mandatory under EU law. There's also something on greenhouse gas emissions. If you make a claim that is climate related and emissions related, there is some transparency required to what extent it's really maybe a reduction of your own emissions, or if you're buying offsets to offset your emissions or removing your emissions via credits. And there's also something on using high quality data, so wherever possible, primary data from your production process. Now, I'll mark a couple of times that we are still expecting future rules besides what the proposal says that's on the table now. And that is because a lot of these questions are very technical. The substantiation now gives general principles without specifying how that could look like in sectors or for specific topics. So on a couple of occasions, the proposal has the possibility that the Commission can adopt future so-called delegated acts where they would go more into detail. And this is also the case here for the substantiation requirements. Even after this proposal will be adopted in a few years' time, we expect that the Commission would start further work to look into more detail how should claims by the textiles industries be substantiated, or how should claims related to biodiversity be substantiated. Then there's also an article on communication of environmental claims. So this links very logical to the previous step, that you can only communicate on something that you have substantiated and that is of significance. And then there are a few more things. For example, if it's a claim that relates to the future, for example, we will reduce our use of virgin raw materials or something like that, then it must come with a time-bound commitment to also specify, for example, by 2030, by 50%, with some steps in between how this will be achieved. And then the idea is also that there would be an information carrier on the product next to the claim or the label, for example, a QR code, where then more information is available to consumers regarding the substantiation, but also regarding a proof that this claim has been verified, which is something I'll touch on in a few slides, the verification. Also here, there's a possibility that the Commission will specify in future rules how exact, if there are more rules on communication for specific sectors or for specific topics. Then there are a few articles in relation to green labels. This is in a way also linked to what the Empowering Consumers Initiative now also has decided, that there's an article about the governance and the independence of environmental labeling schemes that they have to fulfill. They must also comply with the substantiation and the communication requirements. The exemption here is, for example, the EU Eco-label, because it's exempted from the Green Claims Directive. So companies or license holders of that label have the advantage of knowing they automatically comply with the Green Claims Directive. But for all other labels, they would have to go through the process of demonstrating compliance with the Green Claims Directive. And speaking of all other labels, there's also an attempt by the Commission, let's say, to limit a bit how many labels are out there, because there are a lot, and the reasoning is that they are not always bringing added value and that they are partly also redundant. So the Commission has introduced a few ideas how to set a barrier to any potential new labels in the future. So one is on public labels. The proposal is to not allow any more national public labels, but if there should be another public label, it would have to be developed under the EU umbrella. For new private labels, they would not ban them, but any new private label would have to demonstrate that there is an added value, that there is a niche they're filling that's not covered by any other label in order to be allowed. And to create fairness, the Commission would also screen labels from non-EU countries on compliance and on added value before allowing them on the EU market. So that's on new labels. And then there's also an article specifically on labels that look a bit like this A to E scale here, so-called labels that aggregate certain impacts and then give it one letter or one number on a scale. Here, the idea is that with this approach, it's maybe easy to also hide certain impacts that are not so good and overemphasize good impacts and then transform it into an aggregated score. And that's why the EU proposes that aggregated labels can only be developed under union law and not privately or not at national level. This is very controversial in the negotiations at the moment. So all these bans on new labels might come out differently at the end. And also here, future rules would be likely by the Commission to define, for example, how added value of a label could be demonstrated. And now still coming to the verification part of the proposal, and that's actually the big novelty in the Green Claims Directive, is that it has an ex ante logic. So actually that companies wishing to make a green claim or label would have to substantiate and go through all the requirements and have it verified before they can use the claim or the label on the market. This would, of course, mean that member states need to set up a process for verification of every green claim and every green label. Member states would oversee this, but the actual verification of going through the provided substantiation and so on would be done by private, independent verifiers. This would go for claims and for labels. And once the verifier has checked that the documentation provided is sufficient to comply with the directive, then the verifier would issue a certificate of conformity. And that's then the proof that compliance has been achieved. And this is then, for example, also something that would have to hide behind a QR code on the product, this certificate of conformity to prove that it's a compliant claim or a compliant label. Again, here, future rules likely on how exactly would the certificate look like. Yeah, to close, I just wanted to mention I have now on a couple, I think on every slide actually mentioned that future rules are upcoming in future acts, where we really see this as a very difficult discussion. The sector of green claims is very wide, and to find rules that go for all of them in detail is very difficult. So thus, so many future acts are envisioned, which is on the one hand good, but also means a lot of decisions are postponed. And something that we at the EEB are glad to see about in the negotiations at the moment is that in the Parliament's position, the committee position, they have introduced that there should be a consultation forum that helps Commission and Member State experts in the development of all these future rules. So that also this would then include stakeholders from the industry, but also from the NGO side, that everybody would have a say in what are actually the specific, more specific rules that we want to apply to green claims in the future. Now, how will this affect consumers? Personally, I am positive that if these two directives now are adopted and implemented strictly, this can really help in a sense that consumers at the moment, what we often see in surveys say, yes, green information is important for me to decide what I want to buy, but at the same time, there's very low trust in green claims. There's a wariness that or awareness that there is a lot of greenwashing. So it's a difficult situation for consumers at the moment. And these two initiatives really have the potential to, first of all, clear the market of this overload of green information and hopefully have justified trust in the future that a label or a claim that then is still there is really trustworthy. And there's also big potential, for example, through these QR codes that could be on products. Even if not all consumers, of course, would scan this and look into it in detail, any stakeholders who are working with this, for example, NGOs or tools that compare labels and green claims, could have much better information at hand and could also process this and give that back to the public in a way. But a lot remains to be seen on how everything is implemented and enforced in the end. So will it be enough to stop greenwashing? We will see, but it's certainly very promising. And with that, I'm coming to an end for now. Thanks a lot for listening. And I'm looking forward to the discussion later.
All right, Miriam, thank you so much. A lot of input. Wow. I'm going to try to summarize a little bit what has been said to highlight the main takeaways. Also for the people who just recently joined, we'll be sharing the recordings and the presentations as well. So no worry there. So I've been hearing that the problem actually is that the EU wants to address with these directives is that, there's a lot of vague claims being made today, and there is a lack of reliable verification on all those claims. And that's actually what I heard is like a bit of the core, that verifying, you have to prove scientifically if you want to make a claim that that claim actually makes sense. So that's something that I picked up upon. There is differences between the two directives that you highlighted. So the Empowering Consumers Directive comes really with the consumer in mind and tackles most misleading areas in greenwashing. And the other one, the Green Claims Directive, is on top of that, a bit more technical and really directed at companies to guide them on how to communicate about it and guide them on those label schemes as well. So I've been hearing a lot about the ban and blacklisted aspects as well. I'm not going to go into detail there, but general green claims are not done anymore, like green or eco. It's just too vague. And also cherry picking on just a few aspects and then claiming your product is green is also not done anymore. The Green Claims Directive is still not really decided on yet. It's still ongoing, so there is future rules to be expected via delegated acts as well. In that Green Claim Directive, I heard that there is that evidence that needs to be highlighted. There is rules on how to communicate everything, and then support on the environmental labeling schemes as well. A lot of information, but a lot of very comprehensive information. And for that, I wish to thank you very much, Miriam. I see that there is also a lot of questions in the chat, so I'll be taking that with us to the Q&A later on. All right. And now it's time to transition to our next expert. That will be a reflection made by Alexander Sustal and Pascal Göppner from Redeker Sellner Daas. Pascal Göppner is a senior associate since 2020, and he focuses on advising on sustainable products from a contract and consumer perspective, as well as unfair competition law with a focus on litigation and green claims. He's specialized in labeling schemes and sustainable advertising. Alexander Sustal, on the other hand, he's a senior associate with Redeker since 2021, and his focus goes to advising on product law, environmental law, sustainable business models, and ESG reporting, among others. He specializes in eco-design and labeling schemes as well, and both gentlemen will give us a bit of more insight on the legal perspective on the regulation, how those proposals will affect textile companies, what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, what is still allowed, and how to start preparing. So, gentlemen, the floor is yours. We can't hear you yet, Pascal. I'm just going to...
Classic.
Yeah, there you are.
Thank you. Thank you, Magali, for the short introduction, and hello to everyone who's attending the webinar. You see that we are both here and talk together. The background is that the directives we are talking about and greenwashing has, on the one hand, litigation aspect, especially the unfair competition law, which is my part on this side, and the regulatory aspects, which will Alexander introduce you to from the legal aspect perspective after Miriam's voluble and very detailed insight in what's upcoming. Hani, could you share our slides? Thank you. And go to the first slide, please. So what are we talking about today? First up, what is the status quo? So what is in effect right now, and what to do next in regards of the upcoming directives, and how will they modify and in our view give us a more clear picture of how the companies have to act now, and in the third part, the infringements, what is at stake on the regulatory side and as well on the competition side. So what damages or remedies could be in effect there. And I will start with a short introduction at where we are coming from. Miriam already explained what we are tackling now with the directives, and the Empowering the Consumer Directive is a directive that will modify in most parts the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, which is in effect since 2005 and tackles unfair commercial practices. And the most important articles there are Article 5, the prohibition of unfair commercial practices. And that regulates claims and advertising that is able or likely to distort economic behavior of the consumer. And that is exactly what should be regulated more on an ex-ante perspective now with the labeling schemes by the EMCO and GCD directive. To give us, I will tell you a little bit about what the courts say at the moment in a minute, to ensure that claims, especially green claims that come to the market via advertising or labeling on products, will be regulated beforehand. At the moment, we have an Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, or in Germany, the UWG, the Act for Unfair Practices. We have the situation that a company can come up with an advertisement or a claim or green claim on their products, and if it's false or misleading, competitors or associated consumer organizations can go to court with that and try to remedy those claims. And we are in the situation that we have a very unclear legal situation at the moment at what is a substantiated claim and what not. And this is something that will be definitely better in our view with the upcoming directives, as it gives them the companies a more clear picture at how they can use green claims, what green claims are allowed, and how they have to substantiate it. And with the labeling schemes upcoming now, we have a better situation on the from the perspective of the competition law, as they will be certified before they come to the product. And as an example, I have a decision of the Higher Regional Court Frankfurt am Main from November 2022 on a product that was a green cleaning product, and the seller and the company was advertising it as climate neutral. And this is exactly one of the points from the EMCO directive and the GCD that is now not allowed anymore in this form as we see it here. And the Higher Regional Court specified that climate protection is increasingly important issue for the consumers. So they already saw green claims as a viable information under the Unfair Competition Practices Directive, or the UWG in Germany, which is the member state act. And the advertising of a company or its product with a supposed climate neutrality can therefore have a considerable influence on the purchasing decision. And this is from the advertising law standpoint, the most important aspect of these both directives, because both aim at giving the consumer a better factual and evidence-based situation to decide which product to buy. And we had here in this case the situation that they that the company which was selling these cleaning products, they came to climate neutrality claim by using CO2 accountings. What Miriam already told us, that is one of the points that are not now not allowed anymore. And that is the whole problem that we see under the unfair commercial practices aspects, that advertising with green claims is until now really from a legally standpoint unsecure playing field for the companies, because no one really knows how to substantiate it. And as Alex will tell you in a minute, this is what is from legal standpoint and advertising law standpoint, the really big bonus of these two directives, that this part of unfair competition law will now be much more fact-based, and there for the companies there's strict but also transparent rules on how to advertise. Alex.
Okay, Hani, could you please follow with the next slide? Thank you. No one back. Okay, then also a warm welcome from me to all. I'm happy that you joined and that so many came and are interested in our impulse. I will zoom in a bit after Miriam's very comprehensive and very interesting introduction to the directives, and I will take the perspective of a company, and we will walk through an, let's say, virtual assessment what you will have to do in future in case you will do advertisement with green claims. So the first question, the very first question you will have to ask yourself is the scope of this directives. Yeah, the very first question is actually, am I in or out? And it might seem very simple at the first glance that the GCD is somehow related to a B2B context, and the Empower the Consumers Directive is a little bit broader with a also B2B context included. But however, the very big implication for you will be to cluster your customer groups and to review them and to check in which customer group which claim is still applicable and complies with the new regulation or not. So this is the first implication for you have to consider. The second question are the exemptions, and as Miriam said, there are various exemptions. Some of them are rather easy to somehow, let's say, handle, but some of the exemptions there are a little bit unclear. Yeah, there is one exemption which is rather related to verifiers and not to environmental schemes. Although the exemptions are related to environmental claims and environmental schemes, labeling schemes. So this is a rather unclear issue. So I can give you the recommendation to check carefully the background of the exemptions, and we can get into detail in the Q&A later. Hani, please, the next slide. Okay, that was the scope. Next thing you have to ask yourself, and Miriam already introduced that, this is the substantiation. Yeah, we have a new criterion which is imposed by the Green Claims Directive, and the Green Claims Directive, to put it short, doesn't like unclear and not specified claims, and it also doesn't like claims which are not evidence-based. So in the first step, you have to really clearly separate and check for yourself to which product or to which aspect of your activity your claim relate to. And this is even not enough. The Green Claims Directive introduces further criteria, and these are somehow indicators which are rather abstract and must be applied to the specific case. And there are three indicators or parameters which the Green Claims Directive often uses. This is first, environmental performance, second, environmental aspects, and third, environmental impact. Okay, each of them super abstract. What do they mean? So environmental performance means the performance of a certain product or product group related to environmental aspects or to environmental impacts. Oops, this is also still very abstract. So, okay, we have a certain product, let's say a t-shirt, and this should have a related environmental aspect or environmental impact or the production of the shirt. So still very abstract. We have to zoom in and zoom further to the term environmental aspects. This clarifies a lot. Environmental aspect means an element of a trader's or sector's activity or product group that can interact with the environment. So let's say if we have a shirt and we have a production site for a shirt, this production site somehow interacts with the environment. We have bleaching substances, we have water filters, there are certain installations I have made. All these things interact with the environment. On top, and this is the next level, comes the environmental impact. This is something which is not neutral anymore, which means the environmental aspect, the link to the environment, now somehow talks with the environment, which means if I, let's say, bleach my shirt and I don't have a filter, then it has a negative environmental impact on the environment. On the other hand, if I use a filter, that's a very simple example, but I use it because this is so abstract. If I have a filter, then I will improve the environment. So this is somehow how these three criteria are based on, or what's the idea behind them, and I will show you this in a small flow chart. Hani, can you switch to the next slide, please? Okay. So there you can see on the top the product group, trader, or a certain sector. This sector or product has a certain performance, and this performance is connected with environmental aspects or impacts, and they interact or change the environment. So that's the system you have to report on and you have to assess somehow. Okay, Hani, please next to the next slide. Okay. So as we already can imply from this, you have to do a performance check. You have to also do a life cycle check, what Miriam already referenced, which means you have to do a life cycle analysis connected to environmental performance, impacts, and aspects. And now we come to the very core of this substantialization criterion. It is the use of a scientific and evidence-based information and method. It means that the method you use must be widely recognized by scientifically evidenced, and the standards must be developed in line with best practice, or this is the other options, independently peer reviewed by qualified experts. These are rather new standards, you use, which is the second criterion. And then we have also, can you please switch to the next slide, Hani? Specifications of this requirement, which are stipulated by international standards, and the Green Claims Directive refers to regulation EU number 1025 2012, which refers to such international standards, and these standards can be a guideline for your scientifically based approach. Now, other very important implication of this assessment system is that there is a priority or prevalence of primary information. So you have to use primary data from your production. The Green Claims Directive doesn't like secondary information. Such information can be only used as an exception. Now comes the good news. Hani, can you switch to the next slide? So if you look at this new regulatory setup of the European Union, you will have to use primary information or primary data for many regulations, not just the sales sector, which is targeted by the Green Claims Directive. Also, the Ecodesign will require, according to the Ecodesign regulation, to be primary data fit, because this primary data must be used in product passports. Also, primary data have to be used in the finance reporting and the non-financial reporting under the taxonomy regulation and under the CSRD. This means, what is the key for you to comply with all these regulations? The key is to somehow very carefully collect high quantities of data which have a very high quality, and to have a good data integration in your compliance system. This will help you a lot to tackle all these regulations. Okay, Hani, can we come to the next slide? Thanks a lot. Okay. Other important thing to note is that the Green Claims Directive doesn't like aggregated indicators. This is something like secondary data for the Green Claims Directives, because such indicators, they are very unclear, and the consumer doesn't know which good aspect or which indicator which pushes the product or certain method is somehow balanced off with a negative aspect. So such indicators may only be used if they are somehow stipulated in EU regulations, or if there are no such regulation under national laws. Other important aspect is that you should have to do a cross-check. It means if you have a good environmental aspect in your product, let's say your shirt is from cotton, which is somehow organic, but still there is a large water consumption to produce the shirt, then you have also referred to this point and somehow to off-balance it. We know this criterion as a do not significant harm criterion, and we know it from the taxonomy regulation who has dealt with that. It's an import from there, according to my opinion. So the next step you already know, Miriam has introduced, don't claim what you have to fulfill anyway. Of course, these are low-hanging fruits, and the Green Claims Directive doesn't like such fruits. Okay, let's skip to the next slide,
Alexander,
please.
I'm just a bit concerned also about time for our next input. So I'm not sure if you could summarize maybe a bit what's coming up.
Sure.
And make sure to wrap up if that's possible.
How many minutes do I have?
Well, we're actually a bit over time already, but it's no problem at all.
Okay.
We'll make sure to manage, but
okay, to put it to we will summarize it in a nutshell. Okay. We will skip this slide and jump straight to the next slide, communication requirements. What's important for you to know is that you have to have this data carrier or link, but also provide the information in a physical form, at least to some part, because not everyone is able to use a link. Then also you don't have to use double links or two links or two data carriers. Is just one carrier. Otherwise, the consumer might be confused. This is the most important aspect here. We will jump to the next slide. Labels. What's important to know relating to labels? You can still use your old label and the old labeling scheme if it does comply with the Green Claims Directive. This is in a nutshell the most important thing. You will ask yourself, can I use it? Yes, if it does comply, and you have to inform yourself. Okay, this is this part, and then the most important part for you and also from our perspective is what happens if you have done a mistake. Well, then from a public law perspective, you will have to pay a penalty, a fine, which is also related to your turnover, and also your benefits might be skimmed off. The authorities might get this information by a complaints mechanism, which should be established in future. Pascal will relate now to some specifics of civil law, and then we will come to the end of our impulse. We don't hear you.
Thank you, Alex. From the civil law perspective, advertising law and competition law, we have the possibility that other companies or consumer associations have the possibility to sue the advertising company and go for elimination or injunctive relief claim under German law, or go for a compensation for damages, or a confiscation of profits, to sum it up. So that's the civil law part of how these misleading claims will be handled between competitors. Alex, do you want to wrap it up?
We can't hear you, Alex.
Excuse me. Last famous words. Check carefully and specify and collect primary data. This is the key.
All right. Thank you so much, Alexander and Pascal, for your inputs. A lot of information as well. Your slides will be shared with the audience as well as the recording. So without much further ado, we'll be jumping to our last expert, and that will be Robert Suter. He is from ICL Alliance, and he's responsible for stakeholder engagement at ICL since 2023. Previously, he held various roles at the intersection of trade, finance, and public policy at the Swiss government agency. Robert will shed his light on how the directive will affect the label landscape and how can labels actually prepare also to support companies further. Robert, there you go.
Thank you very much, and welcome also from my side. Thanks a lot for inviting me and for giving us the opportunity to share some reflections on the Green Claims Directive. Just maybe to start with who we are, ICL, and where we're coming from to sort of this discussion. ICL is a membership organization for ambitious, collaborative, and transparent sustainability systems. With that, we mean all kinds of certification and labeling schemes, many of whom you know, and all of sort of the big famous ones certainly are part of ICL's membership community. Together with these members and with stakeholders overall, ICL has developed a number of credibility principles over the years and has sort of synthesized also a lot of the interaction in a code of good practice for credible practices in sustainability systems. And that's actually a lot of what the thought that has been put into this is also now being taken up in various regulations, and the Green Claims Directive is one of them. And credibility is sort of at the core of these projects. So I do want to start also by sharing a bit about what is this, what are these credibility principles, and that will give you some background of where we're coming from. So what we do is as I mentioned, we define the core values of what a trustworthy sustainability system is that delivers impacts. And the use of that is not just for sustainability systems themselves, but also for businesses, for governments, civil society, who need help to identify what is a credible sustainability systems, which one of all these that are out there are best perform best on this. And it can of course also be used, as we see here in this particular instance, in setting out policy, public policy on sustainability matters, and it also helps in researchers in giving a common framework. So what are these principles? I would put at the center of it all sustainability impacts. A credible system sets out to deliver sustainability impacts, addressing the most significant issues in its scope. It then demonstrates measurable progress towards its sustainability objectives by collecting and analyzing relevant data. We've just heard how important that is. This analysis also drives then learning and continual improvement, a matter that is at the very core also of a credible system. And I will get back to that also later on. A credible system should be open to collaboration while having a viable business model that creates value for all users. And its approach to stakeholder engagement should empower a diverse group of stakeholders to participate in decisions and hold the system to account. And then some of the principles cover more technical components of a credible system. For example, reliability. It's essential to ensuring a system is delivering its intended outcomes. And finally, impartiality, transparency, and truthfulness, which are vital for a credible sustainability system as well, if it wants to earn trust by being objective, open, and honest. So these credibility principles is sort of the lens with which we are also looking at the regulation that has been introduced. And I will not go through this slide. Again, you've heard in great detail what is covered by the law, what is its aim, and what are sort of the main components. I would like to go over just sort of when we look at such a law, what are sort of our main concerns? I think, and everyone here always gets a bit nervous when new regulation is being proposed. Even the best intentioned regulation can of course have unintended consequences. And so we are very much supportive of what is being proposed, what is sort of the goal of this regulation, but we do of course have some concerns in that we may want to just have a look at. So one of the things is that we believe that there needs to be some flexibility in the methodology for substantiating environmental claims, and that is because there are certainly claims that are made about products that are about the whole product itself and about its in general environmental performance. And in that, for example, it may make sense to have something like a life cycle assessment methodology applied to it. In other cases, the most salient sustainability issues might require a different approach if you want to make claims about that and if you want to substantiate those claims. So we believe there needs to be some kind of flexibility in this to be appropriate in the individual cases. And also that, and this is part of our principles, of course, also that we want to see continuous improvement. And how can you innovate and improve if the methodology for substantiating a claim is very rigid? So this is something we've been looking out for and have been communicating about also to policymakers. Then, of course, a key concern for us is that the criteria are robust for the systems that underpin claims and labels. It's our raison d'être. It's what we do. So we want to see criteria that ensure consistent evaluation of claims and labels, so that we don't see different applications of it throughout the union and on different kinds of systems. And we also want to ensure that it actually delivers on credibility of claims and labels. Now, this is sort of very general, and I do want to share a few more details. I won't go too much into sort of the details of where we see there could still be improvement on the criteria for systems. I believe that goes a bit too much into the weeds here, but what might be interesting for you as companies, I think, and what you might also want to think about, what we believe is still missing in the Green Claims Directive is what has been highlighted before. Of course, it's not finished yet, so there are still things in development, but also there are a lot of things that are not defined yet and won't be defined until later in the when the Commission may come out with some guidance documentation or some delegated acts. So we see a lot of missing clarity and details. For example, in the approval procedure, it's nice that there is an approval procedure and that there are pre-approved systems and claims. That is certainly a good development, but it is not yet very clear on how that actually goes. And also on terms like new systems, new sustainability systems will have to show value added to what is already out there. It is very unclear what that means and how that could be proved. Then there are a few items, and I think this has been mentioned, that there is a very close interlinkage between the Green Climate Directive and empowering consumers. One covers a wider area, the Empowering Consumers Directive, and green claims is more specific on environmental claims, but there are some aspects that are defined criteria for labeling schemes, for example, in the Green Claims Directive, that are not equally represented in the Empowering Consumers Directive, and that creates some misalignment and could lead to issues. And I think you also as companies will always have to look at both together, and it's important to keep those things in mind. Then we do believe that the implementation bodies need to be strengthened. Member states bodies that will implement some of the sort of the approval of these claims and labels, they need to have the necessary support and the necessary capacity to do this. And from the conversations we've had so far, we are worried that this is an overlooked aspect at the moment. Then we also believe that further consideration should be given to improvement of within claims. So sustainability action should actually have an effect, and then going forward, continuously improving on that effect. And we are worried that there is not sufficient consideration given to that in the Green Claims Directive. So what are the different provisions doing to support that or hinder that? So for example, if you have a claim and then you are improving on that and you now are amending that claim, how easy it is to do that, of course, impacts on how willing you are to make actual improvements and then communicate that. So maybe just briefly on this as well. We of course are in regular conversation with our community of members, and we see that there is definitely a considerable impact on them, and it depends a lot on what kind of sustainability system it is and what kind of claims they make. But in general, one can say that this is a very important policy file that we are looking at very closely. And there are also some sustainability systems that will have real challenges with complying with these rules. But we believe that credible sustainability systems, and specifically, of course, also those that are in compliance with ICIL's Code of Good Practice, they will be able to cope well with these challenges. And of course, also, I want to reiterate that we absolutely support this direction, and we believe that it will actually be able to strengthen sustainability systems' credibility in the long run. Now, I do want to leave you with a few final thoughts. Maybe one of them I want to reiterate. Please make sure whenever you're looking at this, don't read the Green Claims Directive as a separate thing. It is good to be considered maybe together. So when you're looking at your own claims, consider it together with the Empowering Consumers Directive and what the impacts are there. The Green Claims Directive is not yet finalized, but still it is something you can already kind of analyze, make sort of an early assessment of where you may have issues and where you may have to change certain things. And then what has also come out in our interaction with our members is that there's already there are a lot of questions around how you communicate claims and labels on products in future, how you give access to the required information. It seems to be something that is not as simple and straightforward as one might imagine. So keep that in mind. Don't underestimate the work to be done on that front. And yeah, last but not least, consider using credible sustainability systems to support your claims. I saw just before in the chat there was a question about whether sustainability systems will going forward even be relevant because of all this complexity. And I think sustainability systems can actually help companies to manage this complexity. And if you are using a approved label from a sustainability system, from a credible sustainability system, then a lot of the work will be done for you. So absolutely have a look at that. If you're already using certification schemes, labels, initiate a dialogue with them. They will have to make some changes and talk to them and see how those changes also impacting you as a company. And with that, I'd like to thank you all, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Please feel free to get in touch. Have a look maybe also at our website Evidencia, which brings together evidence on sustainability action and credible sustainability action, which might also help you in substantiating your claims. And also, if you want to learn a bit more about sustainability systems, we have a course coming up that you might want to have a look at. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Robert, for your a lot of insights here as well. I'm straightly going to go into the panel discussion or the moderated questions that we will be dive into together. So I'm going to ask everyone on the virtual stage. My colleague Hani is going to do that for us. All right, there we are. So okay, I'm only seeing Robert actually. Okay, there's everyone. Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to immediately dive into a detailed question, actually, and that's a question from the audience on the idea of green claims and how the idea of green claims and the directive is tackled if the producer is a micro business, like, for instance, a honey producer from Jordan, and a trader is a large company like Aldi or DM. Does the green claim apply then, and to whom? Miriam, is that a question that you might be able to help with?
I'm also happy to delegate it further. All I can say is that I think, first of all, for legal analysis, other stakeholders like us can always try to give an answer if it's clear from the text, but I think a lot still has to be clarified, and then it's safer to rely on statements from the institutions. On this particular question, I've heard it actually before, this relationship between very small traders going through big retailers, but I'm not sure on who the obligation would fall. In general, the Green Claims Directive tackles traders. So I would hope it would still need to be verified, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Is there anything Pascal or Alexander can add to that? Alexander, we can't hear you. The mic is still muted.
From my opinion, it also depends on the perspective of the recipient. The Green Claims Directive also thinks from the consumer perspective, and from the point of view of consumer, it's interesting who is making this claim. So if the trader's doing this claim and the product is somehow sold by micro business, it doesn't matter. Then the trader has to comply with the rules. I would say that's the idea, at least, because otherwise the market would be somehow distorted by wrong information, which just would be somehow backed or compensated because in the background there's a micro business. It could also be a loophole.
Right.
So if I would be a trader, I would supply myself with a lot of micro businesses in order to somehow be free with my claims. Yeah, so that could be an approach. No, it's a matter of construction, of course, but yeah. So
from a competition law standpoint, it depends how it is communicated. If the big trader is advertising the product with the claims made by the micro business, then the court will have to verify if the claim is right. It's an implicit they will in a legal proceeding, they will verify the claim, and the trader has to verify the claim there.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, from competition law perspective, if another trader or competitor goes for an infringement claim, then they will have to substantiate that claim
Right.
if they use it as advertising.
Right. Okay. So thank you for that. We're talking about advertising. There is also a question from the audience that states that is explicit environmental claiming just related to communication on the product, or is there also other channels that will be monitored and where it applies to, like, for instance, company websites or even operations? So is the claim directed to communication only on the product, or is it to be seen more generic? Is there any one of you who thinks, yeah, well, I can take that? Miriam, I see you smile, so maybe.
I can start. So it is to be seen more generically because it is about business to consumer information. So via which channel as a consumer that you receive the information doesn't really matter. Of course, the most obvious one would be on the product itself, but any other channel goes as well.
Yeah.
I do see that it's a bit trickier to draw the line between business to consumer and B2B communication, because you might, as a business, have on your website information that's primarily intended to inform other businesses you're working with. But if you're also targeting consumers with your website, then there would be a gray zone. So the exemption for B2B is really, in my view, what information do you give your the businesses you're working with via internal materials or things you really just send them, and that's not public facing, basically.
Right. Okay.
And from competition law standpoint, it all comes down to what I refer to in Article 5 of the UCPD, the Unfair Competition Commercial Practice Directive. You have to ask yourself, if it is a sort of or form of communication that is likely or that is likely to distort the economic behavior of the consumer. So
Right.
You have to analyze where this information is made public, in which context.
Okay.
And if it's a statement regarding to advertising of the product on the website, for example, and that is exactly what Miriam just said, when it's only made to be communicated on a business-to-business scale, then I would doubt that it would be deemed misleading for the consumer.
Yeah. All right.
It depends on the form of communication and the communication channel chosen by the company.
All right. Thank you for that addition. Robert, there's also a question for you here in the chat. So regarding the focus on credible green or environmental schemes, do you know if the credibility principles already align between ISEAL, the ITC standards map, GIZ, Siegelklarheit? Is there any alignation already?
There actually is. So the ITC standards map and Siegelklarheit, they were informed by ISEAL's credibility principles. So good news on that front. We do talk to each other,
Yeah.
and we do, of course, as much as we can to try to to make sure that we're all talking about the same, coming from the same perspective, from the same starting point. And speaking of that, just in relation to maybe the last question, I think it would be good practice to maybe start this thinking about this more from a perspective of principles behind the laws and not just letter of the law. It's easier for you to find to company-wide ensure that compliance is assured if you are internalizing the principles behind it. Don't think if B2B we can make whatever claims we want. If B2C we have to be really careful. I think it's better to come from it from a principle perspective and ask yourself which are the environmental claims that we have within our company, and let's go through them and see whether we can actually substantiate them.
Yeah, and I see.
Just adding to what Robert just said, what must be considered is that only because claims are made in a B2B context doesn't mean that they do not have legal consequences, because normally in a B2B context there are damages for false information on a contractual basis possible. So that is, as you said, Robert, that is one of the most important things to take with you, that these directives, they form sort of best practice idea of how to do business with green claims, and only because we know now how it works in a business to consumer perspective doesn't mean that the business to business side is not affected by it. As I said, from the competition law standpoint, when you are working with a small business that is making false assumptions on their sustainability of their products, and that is put into advertising by a large trader, that can lead to damages on the contractual side between the small business and the big trader.
Yeah.
So this is really a key point to take that in mind, that those directives are trying to shape the landscape of advertising with green claims as a whole.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for that addition as well. Alexander, if a company misuses the name of a sustainability scheme they adhere to, is the sustainability scheme held accountable for the misuse of its name, or only the company?
If you look at the remedy system of the Green Claims Directive, it's at the trader to remedy the non-compliance.
Mm-hmm.
The trader must be active, and he must react. And if he misuses, then the market surveillance authorities will address him, and they will set him a deadline, and then he has to not use the label and stop it.
Okay.
So that's at least my understanding of the very abstract market surveillance mechanism, which is not detailed yet at the green claims level. There are just some meta ideas, but the person in charge seems to be the trader there, and not the label.
Right. Okay. Thank you for your clarification. Robert, is there ways on which you can clarify a bit how you are working with all your members on the topic of the green claims, or any other related policy files? How does that go?
Happy to. We have regular coordination groups on the different policy files that are particularly affecting sustainability systems amongst our membership, and green claims is one of them. We also internally we of course analyze the policies that are out there and try to see where they could affect sustainability systems, where we as ICIL and whether our community may have some insights and knowledge to share. And here also the Green Claims Directive was of course one of them. We shared an open letter. We shared some proposals for amendments to the Green Claims Directive, and we've just recently also published a position paper. And we continue to be open to discuss with policymakers about the different concerns that we have, the kind of knowledge and information and experience we can bring in. I think we've seen a lot of openness to that input, so it's very encouraging. And with that, we hope that it will be actually effective and achieve its goals.
All right. Yeah, thank you. I hear a lot of communication to be done, actually, also staying on top of things, being on the lookout for what's coming up and what's going on. A question to all of you: what are the sources that our audience can keep an eye on with respect to these two directives, if they want to start to prepare, or if they want to know what's still coming up? What would you advise them to go and have a look at? And maybe I can start with Miriam.
Yeah, so we do have SDEB, our website, where you will also find press releases on the most recent legislative developments. So for the Green Claims Directive, you will see updates there when the different stages are reached, when it's voted in parliament, when the council reaches an agreement, and so on. Yeah, we do not primarily advise companies how to prepare for changes. So if you're really looking for in-depth advice, we would not be the right platform for that, let's say. But yeah, for the empowering consumers, it's already adopted and it's not so technical. So I think for the moment to comply with empowering consumers, it's a bit easier to just check for these blacklisted practices and think about, okay, is this a very generic green claim? Does my sustainability label, if you are the owner of the label, fulfill certain governance points? But that should be not as difficult as what the Green Claims Directive will bring.
All right. Robert, Pascal, anything to add to that? Where should people go to stay informed and stay on top of things? Robert?
At ICIL, we don't publish a policy monitoring or anything like that, but we do publish regularly on what the kind of policy files that we deem to be particularly important to sustainability systems. So do check our website, have a look at our LinkedIn page and at the newsletter. And beyond that, I would say there's actually the Commission has a really good website where they go into details and share where they are with the different legislative projects they have under the umbrella of the Green Deal. So I think that's certainly always worth having a look at without advertising for any of the hundreds of consultants you could have a look at.
Indeed. Pascal, anything to add to that?
No, I think what Robert said is quite right. Just go to the Green Deal website of the European Union. They have all acts and directives they are proposing or that are in effect already with a timeline there to look at, and just keep yourself informed. And if you want to book a consultant, you are always open to do that. But I would suggest just go with what's available from the European Union.
Inform yourself.
Inform yourself,
Miriam, there is one concrete question also on a list of reliable environmental certificates, whether that's available and officially recognized labels lists, and if not, is it something the regulation foresees in? You're muted still. Can we hear you? We can't. Okay, we can't hear Miriam for now. I'm just going to, no, still not. Can you try to say something? No, we're not hearing Miriam. I'm just going to ask another question then to...
Maybe I can add a thought to that question. I think what Miriam also presented is, of course, the Green Claims Directive is not in force yet. So the approval process is also not yet there. And also the transposition into member states' laws is not just there yet. So this will be maybe available in the future, but whether there will be a public list or not, maybe you know more about that if you want to add that into the chat. If you can't get your mic to working.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Robert, for that. Miriam, can you speak? Are you still hearing us? Can you try to say something? I'm not sure if she even hears us. All right. I'm going to ask one last question, and that will be in one word. What would you advise for companies or our audience to do next? Well, maybe not one word, but like a small sentence. Alexander, do you have an idea?
Yeah, as I said, it's important to collect all these informations from the product design. If you design a sustainable product, you should start there to gather information and to build information chunks and to connect this with the sales side.
Okay.
From my perspective, is the the easiest option, and it's very easy, this data integration once it's rolled out. That would be my advice.
Good. So product design and data on that matter. Robert?
Maybe I would go zoom out even one step further and have a look at your strategy. What is really core to you? What is core to your values? And what kind of claims do you want to be able to make based on that? And then analyze through all your claims that you're making, which one is really important to you and where do you actually want to do the work where they don't quite meet the criteria that we foresee will be in place.
Okay, so top-down scanning through everything. Pascal?
Nothing to add to Alex.
All right. Well, that's nice to know that you guys are well aligned there. Miriam, I'm not sure if you already are able to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Oh my goodness, you're back. Yes.
I'm very sorry. I don't know what
No
changed. On
worries.
my side, nothing changed. But about the list, I'm not sure if it was answered, but I also answered in the chat that, in short, no, the official list doesn't exist yet. For last words on top what the rest already mentioned, I really do think that there will still be an added value through having a label, precisely because then typically a label covers many topics. And then as a company who has this label for their product, you can make different claims as long as they're somehow covered by the topic of the label that you have, and you don't have to go through the Green Claims Directive procedure. So while, yes, it's a bit scary, everything that's mentioned in the Green Claims Directive, the labels are kind of a shortcut around it. Yeah. So I would recommend maybe looking at which labels can be interesting for you. And if the EU Eco label makes sense for you, that would be the one that's already for sure on the approved list, let's say.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for all your input. There's a lot to digest. So luckily we have the recording and your slides that will be shared. Thank you for being with us, our dear experts today. I have the honor of passing the last word to my colleague Sandra, who is going to wrap up the series of 6 webinars that we've been having. So there you are, Sandra.
Thank you very much, Magali. And yeah, I just wanted to take the opportunity, since this is the last session in our series today. I would really like to thank everybody involved who contributed, our speakers, our experts, and of course, all the audience for posing questions and being very active. And also, of course, a special thank you to you, Magali, who you have guided us through all the sessions here today and the last sessions in our series so well. So thank you again. And I believe, the high interest in our series shows that we really hit a nerve with all our stakeholders. And if you want to keep informed, maybe, Hani, you could put up the slide, the last one with the contact information. So if you want to keep informed about any further events or activities, please reach out, or about this session today, please reach out to me or to the Textile Partnership or the green button. So you can see the contact info here on the slide. So yeah, please feel free to contact us anytime. Thank you.
All right, and that concludes the series and our session of today. Thank you so much for having been with us. It was a pleasure, actually, to host everything. I learned a lot. I hope you did as well. Thank you for having been with us, and keep up the good work, I would say so. Bye-bye.